Good evening, Graham.
Good evening yourself.
Always good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
On this, just before we started, we were talking about the weather. And I said something about it doesn't feel like my weather anymore. And technically, I think we're in our fourth heat wave. Is it? Of
One
this
long heat wave, I think.
meteorological thing that I was reading, but it does bring with it something clearly that's changing, isn't it? And today was the first day I felt it was really heavy weather in a way that I haven't before. Maybe the humidity's gone up,
Mm.
and there's kind of this weight to it. Something I haven't experienced, certainly not in my back garden anyway. Um, which got me onto the track that you sent through during the week from last week. A couple of ideas, proposals of topics, things that kind of touch on things that directly, very directly, of things in the past we've ruminated over, but a kind of fresh look at that. And today we're going to pick up something fondly titled Doom. And my first thought was doom metal as a genre. And because we both have used or use Boomcat, which is an online record shop, basically, isn't it? And they have
Mm.
categories. They have ways of putting categories together, which helps you with a search engine, or if you like this, you might like that. And Doom was the first thing I thought about. So tell me, to begin with, the first thing on your, again, I'm just taking it in the order they came to me. A really interesting title for something I thought was The Hateful Human. Tell me more about that, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, a fairly clear, widespread cultural phenomenon, which is misanthropy, or the hateful human. The idea that um, human nature is, in some fashion or another, an absolute disaster, I suppose. That it's selfish, irrational, greedy, violent, suspicious. These kinds of traits. My view is that obviously, in the complexity of human self, all of those things are present. But generally in culture, I think those traits are intensified and kind of given as the essence of what it is to be a human. So that there's a remarkable amount of uh, lack of confidence in the ability of people to act in ways that generate progress of any kind, and it, it it's so obvious that um, it's become almost invisible. If you go through any of the kind of big engines of cultural production, streaming services like uh, HBO and Netflix, you'll find just a screed of disaster narratives that are based on the idea that pretty much everyone is the cause of their own disaster, and the main way in which people respond to disaster is to become monsters. The same with Marvel films. You know, the whole thing is one long apocalypse fantasy, um, and there's very little in a lot of political discussions now. There's very little in the way of trying to redeem something that might be called the better self or the sociable self, or uh, the the notion that people can be enlightened. All of those things that kind of rumbled around a little when, well, in other snippets of history, rumbled around. Those are kind of gone. So the hateful human, I think, is the modal archetype of how people understand human nature, and it's something I find really disturbing and upsetting and clearly contestable.
Is this something that you feel you've inherited, or it's something that you've been very conscious of? Um, and obviously, the nature of your thought and thinking is one that wants to just get past sort of the popularist idea of who we are and what we are. And I know a lot of your writing tries to at least deal with some of the irrational. I was going to use any number of different words at that point. That gets us away from the kind of big headline statements. And it's interesting you say the hateful human rather than humans. So when you say that, do you have some characteristic in mind? Is this gendered, or is it just a broad sweep across west, north, east, west, south, or is it much more to do with your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very Western phenomenon. I wouldn't want to extrapolate to other places necessarily. But certainly in Western popular culture, I think that general orientation is very, very present indeed. I don't know if it's gendered or aged or raced especially strongly, and I think, I mean, I'm sure it is in various ways, and one might wish to excavate those ways, but I think it still bears out as a generalization across social groups. And I think that one of the reasons why it is because it's not this idea, this misanthropic meta-narrative, the coordinates within which narratives are arranged, is not conservative anymore, or at least not only conservative, it's also liberal. In other words, it keys into what most people in the creatives in the cultural industries of media and film and television are all largely liberal in their worldview, and I think that you can see it there as well. So I think it's quite common for largely doom-laden narratives of our future to be peppered with little signals of liberal sensibility about race or gender. Right? So it's not that the zombies are some sort of crude visual metaphor for black people, which would be a very obviously racist and conservative narrative. It's that liberalism is itself doom-laden. Um,
Tell me more
it's
about
something that can.
Tell me
Pardon
more
me?
about that, Graham. What do you mean by that? That liberalism is by nature doom, yeah, doom laden.
Yeah. I mean, liberalism is a big topic, and I endlessly play in the choppy waters of liberalism and its broad history. And I think there's a general sense amongst people who are interested in liberalism that it's kind of losing its sense of hope and aspiration. Right? Liberalism as an ideology was incredibly exciting, and I know it's kind of nowadays you go, oh, liberalism, yeah. Because it's seen as a kind of really shit thing. But liberalism historically was the foundation of democracy. It was the idea that everyone should have a say in the way in which they're governed. It was the foundation of what's now called second wave feminism, and first wave feminism, right? These kind of iconic texts about women and the vote. It was something that were quickly articulated to the idea of civil society, that we can all socialize. Um, and it also then expanded around the time of the First World War to the idea that there might be an aspiration towards global peace. So liberalism was historically peppered with optimism and hope and the idea of progress. Whereas now I think liberalism is far less secure about itself and far more amenable to kind of produce all of these anxieties about its own decline, or to kind of throw up a white towel and say, well, all of this stuff about progress and the market and democracy and citizenship, are actually all going to crash down, and we can enjoy the spectacle ironically, or we can enjoy the spectacle through a kind of narrowing window of consumption. Um, and that's that. And then when we leave the rest of our history to the lions, you know. So liberalism is, I think, now perfectly compatible with apocalyptic visions, and it tends to produce apocalyptic visions that are, as I say, kind of tainted with these weird egalitarian moments where, you know, black and white and male and female and people from many nationalities can enjoy together their own demise.
Mm. So you brought it up. It's kind of dystopian idea then of not only it's a kind of route of travel, isn't it? Because dystopia is both it's present but it's future, isn't it? Which I'm concurring with you, and I can think immediately of examples, and you brought them up at the beginning, certainly in very popular fiction and in popular cinema. This idea of a kind of, we're heading to some sort of dystopian thing. But what do you mean by dystopian then?
Situations within which law and order have collapsed, and in the absence of law and order, the essence of human nature comes out, it's released once there is no law and order, and that human nature is by and large predatory. Well, it's to use the phrase from one of the greatest political theorists and a pre-liberal political theorist, that life is nasty, brutish, nasty, solitary, poor, brutish, and short. And I've missed one of them out. But any solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, I think. In other words, that when you take away law and order, people become rivals. They tend to prey on each other. They become insecure. Ideas about the future disappear because no one has any security, and everything just goes to shit. And that's the it's a very powerful cultural trope that manifests itself in visions of impossible to control viruses, of climate change disaster, of zombies, of alien visitations. I mean, it really is so pervasive. Every single vision of the future is a fucking nightmare. We have no future positives.
Good one. I was yeah, good. Maybe I could have a retort at some point to that, but okay. Well, you brought it up. I mean, one of the commentaries that, it's not just me saying this, is in a lot of things, is that what is a threat now is often non-visible, in a way that the way in which the war in the Ukraine shifted now to really smart teenagers sat at laptops sending off drones to hit specific targets, that idea of, you know, the one-to-one physical threat has disappeared. It's and you mentioned it before, the virus, you know, we've just, you know, post-COVID and all that, there's something really, it's the one thing that absolutely immobilised the whole globe, didn't it? It was pretty conceptually extraordinary. I mean, it was terrible in so many ways.
Well, I have a view on that.
But, so you were saying something about, and again, you dropped us a line that said, virus as the motif of the future. So when you say virus, are you thinking of very specific things, or is it more a kind of general emotional conceptual threat, that a virus could be a metaphor for any number of different things?
Yeah, I mean, there are other things I should have added to that, but I think the virus is a quite important part of the ways in which the narrative is spun. And I don't mean literally a virus, as much as the idea of infection and loss of control. In the history of zombie, I like zombie films, and I think sometimes you can see a little, it kind of throws a funny little light onto the way in which Western cultures perceive themselves. And zombies used to be, well, they used to be kind of like slightly magical creatures that emerged out of the folklores, the Creole folklores of uh, people who were eventually liberating themselves or liberated from slavery in plantation economies. So these kinds of working drones, in effect, so to speak, or perhaps more correctly, robots, working drones, living dead, working dead, and brought to life through mystical means. And then there's the kind of exciting early modern zombie, which kind of comes from a mystery radiation effect of some kind, right? Very Cold War, and classically in Murders in the Murders in the Manchester Morgue, one of my favourite early English zombie films, and then the George Romero films. And now all the zombies are basically being infected by a virus. Right? They tend to be in most of the films now either through a fungus or a virus infections. Right, so it creates these situations where everyone hates and fears each other, thinks they're probably infected. Shoots. Usually in a film, you end up with somebody shooting a non-infected person. The darker the better. People giving birth to zombie babies that are killed. The darker the better. People ending up all dead. Everyone being dead, and everyone being once dead alive and wanting to kill and infect everyone else on a scale that's global. So the within that kind of modern zombie, the infected zombie, you get probably your most classic dystopian image. The Last of Us on HBO. For example, which is a mediocre program that got massively good reviews, and I think all the reason why all these programs get such good reviews is because everyone thinks that dystopia is intelligent, right? So if you've got enough money and you produce a world in which there are skyscrapers with their windows broken through, and 4 people with guns shooting everything that moves, you've done something smart, and you haven't. You've done something childish with a lot of money.
Yeah, I think when you sent it, I was the virus metaphor word sort of thing. I immediately thought of IT viruses, which again you read about every so often. The big corporate companies had a meltdown because they've been infected by some virus which has destabilized their systems. But listening to what you were saying, it made me think about the difference between vampires and the kind of the H. Potter rings thing, which is still using the old metaphor of the physical ground in which you contest. And the orcs, I think we might have said before, the orcs are always like these deformed hybrid objects. They're not human. They're just drones sent in by the millions to be destroyed by one pointy-eared Archie-man or something. But the difference in the narrative between the vampire, which was a very material, physical thing, and I did watch some of the Potters because of, with Grace growing up. But the idea was that the world's become dark. There's no light, and up on his tower they took away the daylight and the weather, and the kingdom becomes one of darkness, and out of which all these things are spawned and grow. And it's the idea of bringing light back, which is just a very fundamental Christian sort of metaphor, isn't it? But you could be accused at this point, Graham, of sort of just cynicism, of a kind of cynical worldview. And it's quite interesting that you wrote cynicism, but it's like performed smartness. So do you want to say a bit more about that? I like the phrase performed smartness. I can already kind of second guess what you're going to say, but I think it's interesting because cynicism is always seen as a very kind of derogatory. Oh, you're just being cynical, blah de blah. What do you mean then in terms of this view? We've been in this dystopian idea of performed smartness then? Is that a response, or is that a kind of an aid to help, or what?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, the word smartness is obviously ambiguous. You don't really call someone smart if they're smart. It's not the right word, is it? Performed smartness is my funny way of characterizing this notion that cynicism is intrinsically intellectually astute. That if you say, well, of course, you know, well, of course, that's a load of rubbish. Or if you say, well, of course, we're all going to. I mean, I've heard people say, well, of course, we'll all be drowning in, a month, or we'll all be drowning in the next 10 years. As if making actually empirically stupid claims about climate change it deserves a little ripple of applause, right? That saying something that is just flippantly dystopic is in some fashion cutting through flim flam, or saying something essentially powerful or insightful, and it's not. It's garbage by any reflective and empirically based reflection. It's not true. But I'm always shocked. It's really shocked and fascinated in equal measure, and this came out of the arse end of my career as a university lecturer in seminars. When anyone said anything about how we're all going to be dead in X number of years, or how there's no hope for anyone in any sense because the oligarchs are always going to win, everyone thought, yeah, you nailed it. And it just seems to me like the most intellectually flippant and simplistic and ahistorical and unnuanced way of understanding politics that there is. But it just gets this kind of cultural accolade, and you can see it in some online discussions. I mean, in blogs and things, and you can see it in some newspapers and journals and things like that. The idea that humans will never escape racism is at the heart of critical race theory. If you say everything's still about colonialism, everyone will say you're right and it's clever and you've nailed it. It's just there all the time, this idea of cynicism. And so it's a kind of performed smartness. If you try and say something about progress or optimism, you're seen as being a bit weird or even conservative or naive or stupid in some fashion. It's quite strange to say, well, think about how many possibilities there are for humankind right now. Or to ask the question, how do we take the massive amounts of social cooperation that take place day to day and think about how they might become sovereign, right? I mean, I'm a socialist, thank fuck. I can't imagine what it's like just to think this is it. Really, is this it? Or something worse than this. So, if you ask those kind of questions, which I sometimes did in seminars, students thought it was a really weird question to ask. And generally didn't really want to, even the kind of liberal, I want to join an aid agency type of students that I had at Durham, they didn't really know how to answer that beyond sort of saying, we could give more aid to poor people. So, yeah. I think cynicism is often used as a mode of address that people use to claim credentials for their insights, which they don't deserve.
Right, nice. Do you think it's, I don't know about this at all, maybe you can help out. Is this a kind of something that was born out of modernity and then post-modernity into the point we're at now? Is cynicism as old as time, or is it a newer phenomena? I mean, I'm going to agree, clearly a lot of rhetoric around sport, around art, culture, stuff I'm looking at all the time. It's kind of coated in this kind of disbelief almost in certain things. Good journalism will strike through it to its credit, but we can think, the Infantino thing, it's like the amount of cynicism in all the reporting, it's just dripping with this, oh, we told you so sort of thing. So just pulling back a bit from that, this notion of dystopian kind of apocalypse idea is not new, though, is it? This is something that's haunted cultures since time began. Be it, I've just been reading about Attila the Hun in Russia, and the fear that it created by literally word of mouth. This kind of apocalypse would literally ride into your homesteads or your village or your town, and unless you paid a tax, you were going to be pillaged. So the apocalypse as a thing is not new, is it? But I think what you were talking about before, and I veer very strongly into those sort of very public narratives like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, very Christian in terms of the construction of the story and the narrative and the good and the evil having very clearly defined parameters. But in a secular apocalypse, is there something different then?
I don't think there is a great deal of difference, and I think there is a difference between apocalypse and disaster, right? So, I mean, loads of people all around the world throughout history have worried about an empire on their boundaries, or a rival, something or the other on their boundaries, or 3 years without rain. Most of humankind has probably lived very closely aware of the possibility of disaster being a real and present danger, right? So disaster is a concrete thing, and we do have many disasters. I'm not trying to gloss the travails that we face in the present day. I'm contesting the way we frame them historically and think about them politically. And I think apocalypse is, and the same with cynicism. Cynicism is old as the Cynics, who were a group of classical philosophers. But when we think about the word apocalypse, it is I think a word that is specifically Christian. And I know I mean I don't think it's particularly wild to claim that most parts of for quite long periods of time and amongst a great many people, even into periods of secularism, Christian historical timescapes persist, right? So the Book of Revelation is actually means apocalypse. Apocalypse isn't disaster; it's the drawing of the veil. In Greek, it's the revelation of the desert that is the nature of human sin, and the realism of human what humans are. Original sin in Christianity is a horrible idea, and it maybe has quite a lot to do with the ways in which we think of the hateful human, and the fact that we're all going to burn in a pit of sulfur or be eaten by each other because we're infected. So apocalypse, I think, is very present in pretty much everything, and it does follow broadly the narrative of the Bible, that we all fall from grace, and we all live in sin, and then we all suffer immensely, largely under a kind of judgmental and severe God. And then at some point, when everything looks completely awful, I mean, this is Revelation, it's batshit, and nothing to do with Jesus' actual life. But they include it in the Bible. I don't know why. There are many different versions of the Bible, but in any case, the Book of Revelation, which I remember reading when I was interested in the occult when I was young, is a remarkable piece of writing, obviously borderline hallucinogenic. And it is about nation will rise against nation, and everything will fall into the sea, and the sea will rise. I mean, it's, Extinction Rebellion squared. And that motif, or that narrative, I think is just really present still. And it's part of a quite strong persistence of Christian storytelling. I say that to someone who doesn't believe it. It's Christian storytelling in popular culture. I mean, the Bible is a crackingly good story, if nothing else.
I agree.
Right?
And
you've got
I was gonna. I mean, because we're kind of loosely framed around this idea of doom, and not doom metal. Although that is phenomenal. Some doom metal is just
Yeah, we should talk about that.
um, what you were just saying is, of course, I'm hearing that, and I'm kind of with you on this prevailing kind of travel of this narrative. And it was thinking about Umberto Eco's book, The Name of the Rose, where this Bible existed in the Middle Ages that the monks had. And because in it was the hypothesis that it was full of laughter and jokes. And the narrative is that you are allowed to look at it, and this thing that the monks would lick their finger and turn the page, and they put arsenic on the top of each page, so they were poisoned in reading it. And there was, but the book itself, the film's actually all right, but the book really goes into this notion of what you kind of touched on was the way in which the schism in the church went one way rather than another way, and that the idea that the Bible would induce laughter was absolutely profane and couldn't be allowed. But like you say, at points, well, I was looking at various points from out of my own interest, reading parts of the Bible. Sometimes it's like you sat on a bus listening to somebody at the back really ranting and going, "Hey, go on, son, get stuck in." I think it's John, when John really gets revved up. It's brilliant. It's kind of stirring stuff. I mean, so there was
John really gets revved up.
good. So this kind of thread then, I'm following the track around this sort of. I don't think you are cynical, Graham. I think you have a tendency to occasionally drift into things, but it's not coming from a cynicism. I don't think it's coming from a frustration or critical, whatever that means, position. So the other point is, okay, if we take an almost antidote to that, then there's this idea of what then? Of some sort of love of, as you wrote, love of innocence and the past. As if, I'm reading that as it was rosier, years ago or in my childhood, or somehow we've got to get back to those more innocent things where you smell the roses, blah de blah, all those cliches. But
Yeah.
when you sent that, I didn't read it as kind of like anything other than not cynical, but a kind of position, So I'm assuming I'm right there. You're not suggesting we all go back to a point of innocence.
No, I'm not. No, on the contrary. Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of
Surely the past is with us in the present and the
to some
future.
degree, yeah. And I mean, all these things are blurry, and we kind of create historical stories in order to ignore and include different things for different reasons. That's self-evident. In a way, I suppose it goes back to these deeper philosophical traditions that feed into apocalyptic narratives. That the prelapsarian, the idea of a moment of calm equilibrium before everything went to shit, is a conservative motif in our narratives about apocalypse. So liberals kind of think we should always progress, we should move forward. We have the the freedoms and the liberty to do that. And then they think, oh God, no, it's not working. Everything's gone wrong. We capitalism is a disaster, and we don't have any way of dealing with it because we're liberals. And everything's gone wrong, so we'll now just watch ourselves scramble and fight each other to the death over a box of cornflakes. Whereas in the conservative argument, there's no real concern with the decline of everything, because conservatives nowadays, real conservatives, not the members of the Conservative Party who are largely, kind of well, they're not really conservatives in a way. That would be a different topic. But people who believe in Merry England, or the kind of, the time when everyone knew their place, or the time when everyone kept their doors unlocked, or the time when we kept calm and carried on, which is probably my least favourite phrase in the English language, and is a myth again in relation to the Second World War. That everything what we have when we face the apocalypse is the ability pleasantly to look back to a time when the sleepy suburbs of London would wake up and people would come into work and do their day's work and return home and smoke a pipe. These all being men. That idea of the beautiful past, the innocence lost past. Again, it's obviously quite similar to Christian narratives about the Garden of Eden. But it's also something that and understandably in a way, people reach for. And I suppose I would say, to some degree, as one gets older, you do. It's a difficult thing to escape. You should fight it with every fibre of your body. But it is sometimes quite tempting to say, well, I remember when there weren't iPhones. I do think that to myself sometimes. I see everyone on their smartphones bumping into each other and not engaging with each other and not seeing the clouds or the sunset. And I think, God, I really am so happy I didn't live in this time as a child or a young person. I can remember not having a phone and being aware of the things around me. And I can remember playing outdoors. And I mean, there's loads of stats that young people don't go out anymore. Loads of terrifying stats about that. And I'm really pleased I'm not in that, So I'm as culpable as anyone. I think it is part of the nature of growing old that you do tend to see the past through rose-tinted glasses, and when there are certain things that worry you in the present, rather than thinking to the future, you look to your own past.
I kind of don't and do agree with that. I mean, that was a kind of bit of a rain check for me when you said that. Do I? And I don't have very rosy glasses, I don't think. Partly because I don't see it as a linear thing, and because our recall is at best inconsistently fragile.
Absolutely.
And having been surrounded by some elderly folk, it's clearly a narrative that's open for polite manipulation, isn't it? When you begin to
no doubt
reminisce.
Absolutely.
So my parting shot to this, Graham, which kind of is a challenging question in a way, because I asked myself the same thing. What you're talking about is socially, culturally, it's there, and I don't think you're saying anything necessarily unique in the broader scheme of things. Your insight's always interesting to me, how you have variables of that. But clearly, it can also be a kind of quite at worst, it's a kind of deflating thing, and it just could leave you in a very destructive, at worst, nihilistic state, what you're describing. But at the same time, times of real disruption and social shift and change, and particularly around certain uncertainties that are very public now, they're not private, everyone knows those pillars of uncertainty, can be very productive creatively. So my question to you is, how do you address this in your writing? You're going to write a doom novel?
No, on the contrary, I would never write a doom novel, really. The idea of writing anything doom-laden literally makes me nauseous. Really does. I hate it. I really do hate it.
Okay.
I'm writing, who gives a shit, but I am. And everything I've written is really anti all of that stuff, and it's really focused on the idea of trying to present I'm hardly. Loads of novelists do this, which is why I think the literary form is far more useful than the political form of writing. Actually, increasingly, political writing, and particularly it's in its academic form, is probably a busted flush. Apart from those people who are really smart, and there are a few of those, but actually quite a lot of jobbing academics write pretty poor material. I don't care anymore. I can say it with some authority, dwindling authority, and with some lassitude. It's pretty dour, and it's pretty formulaic, and it's not particularly interesting stuff. I mean, there's loads of good stuff as well, but that is, I think, the case. Anyway, in relation to the writing, I think literary writing does a far better job of understanding human nature because it can be ambiguous, it can be ironic, it can be multifaceted, it can be far more sensitive to the nature of the inescapable hardships that people face. It has the equipment to understand ordinary people's lives far more effectively than academics do. It is probably the best way of, in a way, it is probably the best way of writing politically, is to write in a literary form, or at least that's my conviction for the next 15 years, after which I'm giving up on becoming a raving conservative like everyone else in my 80s and talking about how it was better in the past. But for now, it's an antidote. The other thing I'm doing is I'm gonna write something about socialism, because I'm constant. My entire life, I've been stuck with the same problem, and any honest socialist will agree with me, and the dishonest ones, or the ideologically charged ones, may not. Which is, I think capitalism is essentially, historically, going to end, and probably going to end in the next generation or so, I would say. In many ways, it was destined to fail, and in many ways, it's produced immense amounts of hardship and violence to ordinary people. It does give us the wherewithal to create an incredible amount of well-being for everybody. That's beyond question. But if you ask any socialist, once they've run out of breath talking about why capitalism is awful, the question, well, what do you think we should do? They usually have no answer to that. They'll go on about the Zapatistas or something. And, that's the thing. Every socialist is stuck with no answer. Particularly, there's nothing for a socialist to say. Almost weirdly, socialism, an ideology that was supposed to appeal to a mass population of working and poor people, has no connection with those people. So if I have any last puff in my formal intellectual life, it might be to try and write something about that.
Interesting. And the failure of the left is something that needs writing about as well.
It's been written about.
Something needs to happen and replace it, as we spit one prime minister in and out at the whim of a drop of a hat, and the world looks on and goes, oh my God, what's happening in the United Kingdom? What's that? 7 prime ministers in the last 4 years or something stupid.
Yeah, a lot of repeated predictable failures. Like everyone's into Andy Burnham. He's going to be you hear it here first. He's going to be stuck with the bond markets like every other prime minister. He's going to go to the ship can in the same way as all the other prime ministers. He is at least not Nigel Farage, and for that reason, I will vote for him.
Yeah, we should be grateful. So my last question, Graham, as we've run to our approximate 40 minutes, can you name me a really good Doom record to put on?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's tons. I do love it. Apocryphos. How's that for a name? Apocryphos. I'll email it to you later, maybe. I haven't got a device here to show you about it. And then there's also what's that one? Yeah, there's another one. Is it called The Devil's Cinema? I think it's called. I like that. And then anything by Southern Lord. The record company Southern Lord is probably best stuff. If it's between 20 and 30 minutes long, and it has one drop D chord,
Hey.
I'm in it.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I think you are as well, big fans of Sunno, but I would not call it Doom. I
No, I
think
wouldn't. Yeah.
it's. I had the best pleasure. I'm trying to write something at the moment for my exhibition that's happening in a month. Um, and it's fun. I still have to start somewhere. But whilst I was doing it, I listened to William Basinski's um, tape, one of his tape, well, I forget what it's called.
Disintegration loops.
Yeah. And I think I've got three. They're in a sequence.
Yeah, they are.
Are just amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You realise you are somewhere else and it's been on for like 35, 40 minutes. They're
Yeah.
really wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, but if you took it quite literally, then it's kind of doom, isn't it? Because it's like the thing's self-destructing. This beautiful sample of a piece of orchestral, normally music, but it's not done in any sort of cynical way. It's done in the most beautiful,
Yeah.
poetic gift he offers you, to have
Yeah.
this moment. And yeah, it was marvellous. So
Yeah. No, absolutely agreed. Yeah.
Doom
Yeah.
can be a
Aesthetically,
really uplifting, embodied, beautiful
exactly.
experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's why
Not
there's
wrong
all
with a bit of
no
doom,
indie poet.
Graham.
Huh?
Not wrong with a bit of doom.
No, I agree. I mean, aesthetically, I think it's perfectly. It's great. It's great. Very often, it is great. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, there's so much. I mean, Basinski also has a CD called Melancholia,
Mm.
and there is something in the heart of the poet, and the various dark genres that Boomcat will put you towards. Um, I mean, all of that Vatican Shadow kind of
Yeah.
electronica stuff is similar. It's dark. It's dark. It's not hopeful.
No.
Um,
And
but it's
Sonic,
fucking banning.
the
Yeah,
wonderful and Sonic take you to some really
yeah, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Anyway, we're drifting off. We're going to talk for hours
I
about
bet
what
actually,
music we like.
if we did a whole kind of genre smart discussion of music, I bet we'd actually get over 10 views. People would like it more than this stuff.
No, they would send really nasty comments disagreeing with you. That seems to be the way.
A comment is better than no comment in social media world. If you get someone pissed off with you, you've actually just created the attention currency that you crave.
Perfect. What a good way to end.
Yeah.
Good wishes to all our viewers and patrons. And
Safe out.
who was today's sponsor?
I think today's sponsor was Extinction Rebellion.
There you go. Thank you,
Yeah.
Extinction Rebellion, for.
Thank you very much, Extinction Rebellion, and we'll see you all in hell.
And we'll see you all next time.
Yes, we will. Bye now.